This is the story of Marcus Cole, a man who lost everything that mattered to him in a single conversation on a Wednesday night. A man who spent 5 years becoming someone the world couldn't ignore. And a man who, when he finally had every reason in the world to walk back through that door with his chest out and his chin up, chose to walk back in quietly instead. The revenge story you're expecting? That's not what this is. What this actually is so much harder to understand, and so much more worth your time. Marcus was 29 when Amanda left. They had been together for 4 years. They shared an apartment in Columbus, Ohio, a small place on the 3rd floor with a radiator that clanked all winter and a view of a parking garage. It wasn't much, but Marcus had always said it felt like home because she was in it. He was working as a mid-level project manager at a logistics company. Decent salary, stable job, the kind of life that looks fine on paper but feels, on the inside, like you're moving through wet concrete every single day. He knew he was capable of more. He just hadn't figured out how to get there yet. Amanda was sharp, driven, and had the kind of ambition that fills a room before she even walks into it. She had just gotten a promotion. She was moving fast. And Marcus, steady, careful, still figuring it out. Marcus wasn't moving fast enough. She didn't leave in a fight. That's what made it worse. She sat him down on a Tuesday evening, and she was calm. She was kind, even. And she said the words that quiet men hear in their sleep for years afterward. I love you, but I can't wait for you to become who I think you could be. I need someone who's already there. She moved out by the following weekend. Marcus helped her carry boxes. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just helped her leave, because that's who he was. Even when it was destroying him, he was still the kind of man who held the door open. For about 3 weeks after that, Marcus was not okay. Not dramatic, not okay. Not falling apart in public. Just hollowed out. Like someone had reached into his chest and removed something essential. And now everything still worked, but nothing felt right. He went to work. He came home. He ate whatever was in the fridge. He watched TV without watching it. He slept poorly and woke up tired and did it all again. His best friend Darnell came over one Friday night with a six-pack and the specific intention of forcing Marcus to talk. Marcus let him in, took the beer, and then sat there for 20 minutes saying almost nothing. Finally, Darnell said, "So what are you going to do?" Marcus looked at him, and something behind his eyes clicked on. He said, "I'm going to build something." Darnell didn't know what that meant, but the way Marcus said it, low, steady, certain, it didn't sound like grief. It sounded like a decision. Marcus started with nothing except a problem he'd been watching at work for years. The logistics industry was bleeding money on last-mile delivery inefficiencies. That last stretch of getting a package from a warehouse to someone's front door. It was slow, expensive, and broken in about 15 different ways. Marcus had been watching it daily for 5 years. He'd written ideas about it in notebooks that he'd never shown anyone. He'd identified gaps that the big companies were too comfortable to fix. He started a small software company from his apartment. Not the clanking radiator apartment. He'd moved to a smaller place after Amanda left, a studio that was mostly just a desk and a mattress. He consulted during the day. He built at night. He ate a lot of instant noodles, which is not a metaphor. It's just what happened when you spend your food budget on cloud server costs. He didn't tell many people what he was doing. Not because he was secretive, because he'd learned something from Amanda's words that she probably didn't intend to teach him, that the best way to prove something is not to announce it. It's to let the thing speak for itself. He worked for 18 months before he had something real, a routing optimization platform that could cut last-mile delivery costs by up to 30%. He had 3 clients, then 12, then a partnership with a regional carrier that changed everything. He hired his first employee at month 22, his 10th at month 30. By the time Marcus Cole was 34, his company had 41 employees, was operating in 7 states, and had just been featured in a logistics industry publication that called him one of the quiet forces reshaping American supply chain infrastructure. He had built the empire. He had not told Amanda. Here's what you need to understand about Marcus during these 5 years, and this is important. He was not thinking about Amanda every day. People assume that success built after heartbreak is always about the heartbreak. That every late night and every hard decision is secretly a message to the person who left. And sure, sometimes it starts that way. Maybe the first 6 months it does. But real building takes over eventually. Real work becomes its own reason. You stop doing it to prove something to someone else and start doing it because the thing itself has become the most alive part of your life. Marcus fell in love with the work. Genuinely. He fell in love with solving hard problems. He fell in love with watching his team grow. He fell in love with the version of himself that showed up at 6 a.m. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He dated a little during those years. Nothing that lasted. Not because he was still broken over Amanda, but because he was, if he was honest, still becoming. He wasn't ready to give someone the best of him because the best of him was still being assembled. He told Darnell once, "I don't want to be someone's project. I want to be someone's equal." Darnell said that was either the wisest thing he'd ever heard or a very complicated way of avoiding feelings. Marcus smiled and said, "Probably both." He heard about Amanda through Darnell. The way you always hear about people from the past, sideways, casually, like it's nothing, when it is actually something. Darnell mentioned that Amanda had hit a rough patch. The fast track she'd been on had derailed. The company she'd grown with had gone through massive layoffs. She'd lost her job 11 months ago. Her new relationship, the one she'd started about a year after leaving Marcus, had ended badly. She was back in Columbus, staying temporarily with her mother, trying to figure out what came next. Marcus listened to all of this without expression. Then he said, "Is she okay?" "Not. Serves her right. Not. Interesting." Not even a long pause full of unspoken satisfaction. Just, "Is she okay?" Darnell studied him for a second. Then he said, "I don't know, man. I think she's struggling." Marcus nodded slowly. And 3 days later, without announcement, without a plan, without knowing what he was going to say, he drove to Columbus. He didn't call ahead. He knocked on the door of the house. She grew up in a pale yellow house on Clement Street that he'd been to maybe a dozen times over the years. Her mother answered. Her eyes went wide when she saw him, then soft. Then she stepped aside without a word. Amanda was in the kitchen. She was in an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled back, a mug of coffee in both hands. She looked up when she heard footsteps, and then she went completely still. For a moment, neither of them moved. She looked different. Not worse, just weathered. Like someone who has been through something real and is still in the middle of processing it. Her eyes, when they finally met his, had something in them that he'd never seen there before. She looked tired. She looked scared. She looked like someone who had been holding everything together with both hands for a long time and was running out of grip. He pulled out a chair, sat across from her. He said, "I heard you were having a hard time." She blinked. She said, "You came here because of that?" He said, "Yeah." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at her mug, in a voice that was very small for someone who used to fill every room she walked into. She said, "I don't understand why." And Marcus said something that she would think about for the rest of her life. He said, "Because you mattered to me. That doesn't expire." She cried. Not immediately. Amanda was not a person who cried easily. But a few minutes into the conversation, something gave way, and she cried quietly with her face turned toward the window. And Marcus sat there and let her, and didn't try to fix it. She told him everything. The job, the relationship that had crumbled in ways that still embarrassed her, the feeling of having been so certain about the direction of her life, and then watching that direction just disappear, the exhaustion of starting over, the specific humiliation of being a person who once had all the answers and now couldn't find a single one. She said, "I was so sure I knew what I needed. I was so sure you weren't it." She wasn't asking for him back. She wasn't performing regret. She was just being honest in the way that people are honest when they've run out of energy for anything else. He listened. Then he said, "You weren't wrong about me, Amanda. The version of me that you left. You were right to want more than that." She looked at him. He said, "I just had to go become more. That's all." He didn't offer her a job. He didn't offer to fix her situation. He didn't swoop in with his success like a tool. What he did, over the following weeks, was just show up. He was in Columbus on business twice that month. Both times, he stopped by. They had dinner once. He met her mother for a real conversation for the first time. Not as a boyfriend, but just as a person. He texted to check in. Not flooding, just steady, just present. It was Darnell who finally said to him, "You still love her, don't you?" Marcus thought about it. Really thought about it. Not the fast answer, not the defensive one. Then he said, "I love who she is when she's not performing. I think I've only seen that a few times. I saw it last month in that kitchen. Darnell said, Man, that's either beautiful or a disaster. Marcus said, Probably both. Amanda called him on a Thursday night, 3 months after he'd knocked on her mother's door. She said, I have a question and I need you to be honest. He said, Okay. She said, Why did you really come back? Was it, was any part of it about showing me what I missed? Because if it was, I would understand. I just need to know. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Then Marcus said, I thought about that. Before I drove up, I actually asked myself that exact question. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a gas station and I asked myself, Are you doing this for the right reason or are you doing this to feel something? And the answer I got back was, You want to know if she's okay. That's it. That's the whole reason. Amanda was quiet. He said, The empire, that was never for you. I know that sounds like it should hurt, but it's actually the best thing I can tell you. I built it because I finally figured out who I was without you. And that person decided to come check on you. Not to win, just to check. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I think that might be the most grown-up thing anyone has ever said to me. He laughed quietly. She said, Marcus. He said, Yeah. She said, I'd like to try again. If you'd want that. Long pause. He said, I'd want that. Here is the part of this story that isn't romantic, but is probably the most important part. They were different people the second time. Not better versions of their old selves. Actually, different people who happened to share a history. Amanda had been broken down to something honest by her hard years. The performance was gone. The certainty was replaced by something quieter and more real. She had learned, the hard way, the way most of us learn the things that actually stick. That moving fast in the wrong direction is not the same as going somewhere. And Marcus had learned that you can build the whole world and still not be full if there's nobody to come home to who actually knows you. The empire was real. The success was real. But so was the quiet of his apartment at the end of every long day. They didn't rush. They rebuilt the way you rebuild anything that was once broken, slowly, carefully, checking the foundation before you add the next floor. 1 year after that Thursday night phone call, Marcus and Amanda got married in a small ceremony in Columbus with 40 people, a jazz band, and Darnell crying before he could finish the best man speech. At the reception, someone asked Marcus if he ever thought about what his life would have looked like if Amanda hadn't. Then he said, I'd be okay, but I wouldn't be this. And I don't think I'd be someone she could actually love. Then he looked across the room at her, laughing at something her mother had said, comfortable in her own skin in a way she hadn't been 5 years ago. He said, She needed me to go away and become someone. And I needed her to go away and become someone. We just both had to do it on our own first. Some people leave your life and they take something with them. Something you didn't even know you had until it was gone. And then there are some rare people, rare in the way that actually matters, who leave, and in leaving, accidentally give you something. Amanda left Marcus a question he had to answer with his whole life. The question wasn't, how do I get her back? It was, who am I, actually, when there's nobody watching? He spent 5 years answering it. The empire was not the answer. The empire was just the proof. The answer was a man who drives 3 hours to check on someone, not because he wants credit, but because caring about people is just who he is, whether it costs him something or not. The answer was a man who sat in that kitchen, across from someone who had hurt him, and didn't say, Look what you missed. He said, Are you okay? That's not a man who built an empire for revenge. That's a man who built himself, and then used that self for something worth more than revenge. Not every door that closes is closing on you. Some of them are closing so you'll finally stop leaning on them and learn to stand on your own. Marcus stood. Amanda came back to someone worth coming back to, and neither of them ever again confused speed with direction, or success with arrival, or the noise of ambition with the quiet of actually knowing who you are.